All right, now let's talk about some heuristic methods. Last time we talked about heuristic thinking, which is the idea of focusing on the structure and the process, the question or the framework as a guide to solving problems or creating solutions rather than just the solution itself. This emphasizes exploration, problem solving, and efficiency, which is another aspect of heuristic thinking, which is essentially mental shortcuts. Now, sometimes those mental shortcuts can be helpful. Other times they can hurt. So it's kind of have to navigate which they are and whether they're helpful or not. But just being more conscious about them, you can use them as tools. So we're going to go over some heuristic methods, which we can use as strategies or mental shortcuts to simplify problem solving and decision making. These often rely on practical techniques rather than an exhaustive analysis, making them especially useful in complex or ambiguous situations. A good heuristic often starts with the right question, like we talked about in the last video, guiding exploration towards efficient outcomes. It uses mental shortcuts or rules of thumb, which a rule of thumb is a heuristic, to frame problems and explore solutions. So here are some common heuristic methods. Let's start with a rule of thumb. This is a simple guideline based on experience or general principles. So an example would be, if you're unsure about a purchase, maybe sleep on it before deciding. An application of that would just be quick decision making in everyday life or business, and it's very useful. Actually, this is kind of like when you're driving a car. You have these mental shortcuts. You don't have to think about what you do when you approach certain situations. You just do it. Trial and error is testing multiple approaches until one works. So a lot of these are going to sound pedantic because they kind of are. Like, they are things you use all the time in life to get through life, but let's just keep going. So this is where you test multiple approaches until one works. It's like a brute force attack to problem solving. So an example would be trying different processes until the best one is found. An application of this is when a clear path is not known, you can just iterate through processes until you find one that works. This next one is called working backward. So this is where you start with the desired outcome and then you track backward to where you are now. An example of this would be solving a maze or beginning at the exit and working towards interest. But in a project, it would be like, hey, we want to have this end result, so therefore what are the steps we need to get there? It's useful in planning, goal setting, and reverse engineering, which is the next one. Reverse engineering is the process of deconstructing a system, product, or process to understand its components and how they work, often for replication or improvement. An example of this would be analyzing a competitor's website to learn their strategies and applying similar techniques to your own site. An application of this would be used in product design, competitive analysis, and problem solving to gain insights or replicate functionality. Simplification is the next one. That is where you break a problem into smaller, more manageable components. This is like if you don't know how to solve a problem, you just break it down into smaller and smaller problems until you do know how to solve the problem. An example of this would be solving a complex math equation by addressing its parts individually. Application of this is used in project management, coding, or strategic planning. Next one, pattern recognition. This is identifying recurring structures or relationships to make decisions. So it's where you recognize that a certain customer segment always responds to discounts, therefore you send them this type of discount because you know you get a result. It's useful in analytics, marketing, and AI machine learning. This next one is called anchoring. We've talked about that before. It's one of the reasons why people don't want to make a quick decision, because they're afraid that it'll anchor them into an idea tree. So this is where you rely heavily on an initial piece of information to make subsequent decisions. So that's like the tree trunk compared to the branches. An example of this would be setting a high initial price in negotiations to influence the final outcome. So like you don't start low, you start high, right? So that you can back down. It's useful in negotiation, product strategies, and decision making. Next one, availability heuristic. This is one you hear about sometimes in therapy where people are making decisions based on information that's readily available or recent. It can hurt you when you're thinking about flying because if you just hear about a plane crash, you think, oh shoot, I don't want to fly a plane, even though planes are very safe. So it's an example of this is judging the likelihood something based on a news story. And an application of this would be risk assessment or quick judgment calls. Next one, divide and conquer. That's where you split a problem into smaller independent tasks to solve them efficiently. This is very similar to simplification. So an example of this would be sorting algorithms, algorithm design, management, and troubleshooting. Next one, means in analysis. This is identifying the difference between the current state and the goal, then taking the steps to reduce the gap. So this one is similar. You see a lot of overlap here, right? This is very similar to working backwards or reverse engineering. It's just identifying what's the gap and then working to close the gap. Pareto principle, or otherwise known as the 80-20 rule, is focusing on the 20% of efforts that produce the 80% of results. This next one is called satisficing. It is choosing an option that is good enough rather than optimal. So a lot of these tech companies value shipping. They call it like Facebook has this motto, move fast and break stuff. There's a quote that says, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. And that's essentially what satisficing is. It's quick decision making to move things forward. Analogies and metaphors. We've been using a lot of those. We talk about AI and mathematics and all these different things. Using a similar situation or system to understand or solve a problem. That's everybody knows what those are. Gut instinct, intuition, that is actually a heuristic method. So it's making a decision based on feelings. Maybe you want to call this like the Michael Scott method, I don't know. But just making decisions based on a hunch. Hill climbing heuristic. So this is making choices that seem to lead directly towards the goal step by step. So if you don't know what to do, just figure out the next step and do that. Once you figure out that step, figure out the next steps. That's hill climbing. Elimination by aspects. So this is narrowing down options by sequentially removing those that don't meet the criteria. So this is like a process of elimination. Example of this would be choosing a car first by eliminating ones out of your budget, and then next filtering by color. Cognitive restructuring. That is reframing the way you see a problem in order to uncover new solutions. So an example of this would be viewing a business failure as an opportunity to learn and pivot, or a relationship ends, so you say, oh, I get to experience what it's like to be single now. And then lastly, Occam's razor, our favorite. It's a philosophical principle that favors the simplest explanation or solution with the fewest assumptions. For example, if your car won't start, first check to see if it's out of gas rather than take it into the shop. And I actually had a friend that did that. Anyway, not calling him out. Anyway, these methods allow for flexibility and adaptability, which is crucial when clear solutions are not readily apparent, right? Each heuristic has its own strengths and limitations, but then they can be combined or tailored to fit your specific situation.